Balakeli. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Madhava, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram, Shri Shri Gauri Nitai Ki Jai. So we'll go ahead and go straight to the word for word. Bibrat Venum, keeping the flute. Jatara Patayo, between the tight clothing and the abdomen. Shringavetre, both the horn bugle and the cow driving stick. Cha, also. Kakshe, on the waist. Vame, on the left side. Pano, taking in hand. Masrena Kavalam, very nice food. Prepared with rice and first-class curd. Tatpalani, suitable pieces of fruit, like bale. Angulishu, between the fingers. Tishtan, staying in this way. Madhye, in the middle. Swapari Suhradaha, his own personal associates. Hasayan, making them laugh. Narmabhi, with joking words. Swaihi, his own. Swarge loke mishati, while the inhabitants of the heavenly planets, Swargaloka, were watching this wonderful scene. Bubuje, Krishna enjoyed. Yagyabuk, Balakelihi, although he accepts offerings in yagya, for the sake of childhood pastimes, he was enjoying foodstuffs very jubilantly with his cowherd boyfriend. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Krishna is yagya bhuk, that is, he eats only offerings of yagya. But to exhibit his childhood pastimes, he now sat with his flute tucked between his waist and his tight cloth on his right side, and with his horn bugle and cow driving stick on his left, holding in his hand a very nice preparation of yogurt and rice, with pieces of suitable fruit between his fingers. He sat like the whorl of a lotus flower, looking forward toward all his friends, personally joking with them and creating jubilant laughter among them as he ate. At that time, the denizens of heaven were watching, struck with wonder at how the personality of Godhead, who eats only in yagya, was now eating with his friends in the forest. Purport. When Krishna was eating with his cowherd boyfriends, a certain bumblebee came there to take part in the eating. Thus Krishna joked, "Why have you come to disturb my Brahmana friend Madhu Mangala? Do you want to kill a Brahmana? This is not good." All the boys would laugh and enjoy, speaking such joking words while eating. Thus the inhabitants of the higher planets were astonished at how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who eats only when yagya is offered, was now eating like an ordinary child, with his friends in the forest. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahagana Raghuna Tanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll go ahead and read the verse one last time. Krishna is Yagya Bhuk, that is, he eats only offerings of Yagya, but to exhibit his childhood pastimes, he now sat with his flute, tucked between his waist and his tight cloth on his right side, and with his horn bugle and cow driving stick on his left, holding in his hand a very nice preparation of yogurt and rice, with pieces of suitable fruit between his fingers. He sat like the whorl of a lotus flower, looking forward toward all his friends, personally joking with them, and creating jubilant laughter among them as he ate. At that time, the denizens of heaven were watching, struck with wonder at how the personality of Godhead, who eats only in yajna, was now eating with his friends in the forest. I'd like to begin by requesting the blessings of all the devotees assembled today, that by your mercy I may be able to speak something which is truthful, which is faithful to the line of spiritual masters who have carefully preserved this knowledge of Krishna consciousness over the course of ages, and that I may speak in a way that's beneficial for myself and anyone who hears. So, in this verse, we're hearing about something which is very amazing and astonishing to the demigods who are looking on. Demigods are distinguished from the demons by the fact that they acknowledge Krishna or Vishnu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they therefore accept the order of the Lord as their duty, and they carry out their lives according to the instructions of the Shastras and according to the word of the Lord. Whereas demons, yashastra-vitam utsrajya vartate kamakarata, the demons by by definition, are those who don't accept Krishna or Vishnu as supreme, and they don't accept the Shastric injunctions. They don't accept to follow and lead their lives according to the instructions found in the scriptures, in Shastra. But the demigods are obedient to the Supreme Lord, and they acknowledge Him, they acknowledge His supremacy, they acknowledge that they're dependent on Him, and they're accustomed to performing yagyas in acknowledgement of Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna's supreme position. And this is the relationship in which they're familiar with the Supreme Lord. They're familiar with Him as Yagyabhuk, he who eats yagya. And of course in Bhagavad Gita we learn that one who takes foodstuff without first offering it to the Supreme, from whom it came, the person who's made it available to us in the first place, without offering it to the Supreme Lord first, then it's considered sinful to eat foodstuffs. But after offering it to Krishna, then there's been proper acknowledgement of that relationship of dependence on the Supreme Lord, and then the offering comes back down as prasadam, and then demigods or humans alike can then accept that foodstuff, and it's beyond any sinful contamination, and it's spiritual and it's purifying. And but here the demigods have come across this scene where that same Supreme Lord is in a much more you could say casual situation. He's just dressed very simply as a cowherd boy. He's got his flute and his cow driving stick tucked in his dhoti, and he's just sitting with his friends, making them laugh and taking their different offerings that they give to him. And so this brought to mind for me the distinction between the Supreme Lord as Bhagavan and the Supreme Lord as Paramatma. We hear from Srimad Bhagavatam that Vadanti tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam prametmi paramatmeti bhagavani vishabdyate. That one supreme absolute truth, which is indivisible, nevertheless is understood in three different aspects. And one aspect is Brahman, the impersonal, all-pervading aspect of the Absolute. And there's Paramatma, the Super Soul. And there's Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it may seem like a little bit subtle, maybe, what the difference is between Bhagavan and Paramatma. Whereas the difference with Brahman is quite clear. Brahman is this all-pervading energy of the Lord, and it's present everywhere. And it's an impersonal aspect. Whereas what we see with Bhagavan is Krishna as a person in his form, in his transcendental form, made of Satchidananda, eternality, knowledge, and bliss. And but Paramatma also, descriptions of Paramatma are also personal. We hear the Lord within the heart, standing with a conch, club, lotus, disc. He has a beautiful garland. He's got golden yellow cloth, and we even hear about the bees that are buzzing around his garland, seeking the nectar from the flowers. And so it seems like very clearly that both Bhagavan and Paramatma have personal form, both these aspects of the Lord. So then we may be wondering, what is the difference exactly? And that's very much related to what we're reading here today, because although actually it's the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Paramatma is an expansion of Krishna, but at the same time, the purpose, Krishna's purpose in that form as Paramatma, and his focus, and the context he's responding to is different in the role of Bhagavan as in the role of the Super Soul or the Paramatma. So what is the difference? Bhagavan is Krishna in his, more or less in a spiritual context, and Paramatma more or less is Krishna dealing with the material context. So Bhagavan is Krishna in his personal life, with his friends, with his family, with his devotees, where his main business is simply reciprocating in loving exchanges with his devotees. And in the spiritual sky you have Goloka Vrindavan at the top, and then you also have many Vaikuntha planets where the Lord, Bhagavan Narayana, is also engaging with his devotees. They're placing the Lord at the center of their life, serving him in so many ways, and the Lord is graciously accepting and reciprocating with their loving service. And Prabhupada describes that in one corner of the spiritual sky in Vaikuntha, there's like a dark cloud there. And from the expansions of Narayan, you come in expansion of Mahavishnu. And Mahavishnu lays down, goes to that clouded region, that dark clouded region, and he lays down on the water there, on the Viraja river. And that little dark cloud in the corner of Vaikunthas is known as the material world. And the super soul, well, let's say, from Mahavishnu all the universes emanate, and then he expands into Garbhodakashaya Vishnu to be in the center of each universe, laying on the water in the universe. And then from there, the Lord expands into Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, entering into each atom and being present in the heart of every living being. And these are actually the three levels of Paramatma. So the Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, he's the super soul of the heart of every living being and the super soul of every atom. And Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, there at the center of the universe, he's the super soul of each individual universe. And presiding there, presiding over the universe, overseeing the affairs of the universe. And Mahavishnu, or Karanodakashaya Vishnu, he's the super soul of the whole material manifestation. And this is the context in which we hear the term Paramatma come up in the Shastras. It's actually in the context of the cosmic manifestation. And so Paramatma, this is Krishna's form in relation to the material energy and in relation to the living entities who are there in that situation. And Krishna has created that material situation with two particular missions. There's a primary mission that Krishna's accomplishing with the material world, and there's a secondary mission. And the primary mission is to allow for the conditioned souls who have willfully put themselves in a place where they don't have to acknowledge the Lord's supremacy. They wanted to, as Prabhupada says, they turned away from the Lord. That's their mood, that's their attitude, is having turned away from the Lord and seeking to take that supreme position for themselves as far as each one may be able. in whatever particular lifetime and situation that they find themselves in. And Krishna, being fully non-envious and being desirous to respect the free ability to desire of each living being, he doesn't force anybody to serve him. He doesn't force anybody to place their affection in him. Indeed, as Prabhupada makes his point so many times, if the living entities were forced to love Krishna, how could you call that love? What kind of love is forced? You're like a slave, and that love is like a pretense. It's like a cardboard cutout of the real thing. And so, for the respect of real, genuine love, creating an environment in which that love can be meaningful, Krishna allows living entities to turn their love somewhere else if they want to. And so that's what the whole story behind the material world is. But Krishna's primary mission with this material manifestation is to give the living entities many, 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 many chances and opportunities to have a change of heart, to reform their mentality. So he's designed this material world in such a way that living entities can go through so many different kinds of experiences with the goal of ultimately waking them up. And so for the accomplishment of this mission, Krishna is present in their hearts as Sakhya, as a friend. And Prabhupada says that just see how kind is the Lord, that he so cares about each and every living entity, that even though these living entities have desired to turn away from Krishna, he's personally expanded to be present with every single one of them. That no matter what kind of degraded situation they put themselves in, or what kind of ignoble, sinful activities they may be engaged in, the Lord always stays with them in the heart. And he doesn't step out for a few minutes when they're performing some activity that's it's just too abominable. The Lord is, even in the worst of times, even in the lowest, when that living entity is at rock bottom, performing even the most degraded kind of sinful and criminal act, the Lord doesn't step out for a few minutes. He's right there. And Prabhupada says, just see how kind the Lord is. And we can see how committed the Lord is to each individual living being and to this mission, which is the primary purpose, the primary mission of the material world, to help them have a spiritual awakening and come to this realization for themselves that actually I'm only happy serving Krishna. And that's where I belong. I belong back at the lotus feet of Krishna. So that's the primary purpose. And the secondary purpose, which is not really the purpose that sits in the Lord's heart, is to facilitate all the material desires of the living entities. Because it wouldn't really, that if you give the living entities, you respect their free will and you allow them to turn away from the Lord. But if they don't actually have some facility by which they can pursue those material desires, then it's it's like they're not really being given the chance in a sense. So Krishna actually facilitates all the material desires that the living entities desire to act out here in the material world. He's sitting in their hearts as a witness, impartial and neutral, and he's awarding for their pious acts. He's awarding sense gratification, happy experiences, beauty, wealth, whatever they may desire to enjoy, and observing their impious activities, he gives them suitable punishment or retribution for that. But Lord Krishna's, his desire is not really that. It's just like when a father has a very troublesome son or daughter, and that son or daughter is really determined to do something that the father knows is going to be against their best interest. And at first they try to convince them, like, please don't do that, just stay here, I'll arrange a better situation for you. But seeing that the child is very rebellious and persistent, maybe it's a teenage, son or daughter, then finally the father will think that, okay, my son is very, very determined to go out and do this, and I'm not going to convince them otherwise. Let me at least, give them the car so that I know that they're not going to have to go hitchhiking or something, So he thinks it's better to give some facility for that, and hopes that when this person goes through that experience, then they'll learn a lesson from that, and then come back and understand, oh yeah, actually my mother was really looking out for my best interests, so I should come back there, and I should follow my parents' instructions. They know what's best for me. So in that case, the father doesn't really want to do that, but respecting the free will of their son or daughter, they go ahead and agree to do that. So that's not really Krishna's purpose, but the purpose which really is close to Krishna's heart is how to bring the living entities back, how to bring the living entities back to their original consciousness, where they'll be happy and prosperous. But nevertheless, the Lord does facilitate in so many ways, and the Lord is very patient. So to give an example of this facilitation, I'm reading in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this section where the demigods are trying to deal with Vritrasura, who is this large, great demon who's appeared, and he's causing a lot of ruckus in the universe. Though he's not actually doing anything sinful or bad, but he's sort of just by his nature, he's very large. He's expanded to take up and cover practically all the planets in the universe. And so the demigods are finding him to be a disturbance. And of course, recognizing him as a demon, they want to destroy him. And so Indra, having already been defeated in his first attempt to assail the demon, he and all the demigods, they go and they assemble with Lord Brahma to pray to Lord Vishnu that, can you please help us kill this demon? He's really disturbing us. And when the Lord Vishnu appears, he says to the demigods, oh, thank you so much for those nice prayers. That was very nice of you to offer prayers, and indeed this is the path to success, is to place one's thoughts on the Lord and pray to the Lord. And but then Lord Vishnu, without beating around the bush, he then says, but I just want to let you know, just as an aside, that my pure devotees, they never actually ask me for anything material. And in fact, if a benefactor is being approached by a foolish person who's asking for some temporary prize, some temporary item that's ultimately going to lead to their misery, then if that benefactor, if he grants them that thing, then he's just as foolish as them. And but the Lord says, but you'll notice that the pure devotees, when they're approached by a materialistic person to ask for something, they will never consider giving them something which is not beneficial for them. Just like a physician would never suggest a patient to take foodstuffs that are injurious to that person's health. And but then the Lord does go ahead and he gives Indra what he wanted. He said, okay, here's what you're going to do. Do this, you'll get an extremely powerful weapon. You can kill the demon. And so in those prayers was revealed this relationship that the Lord has with the demigods, who have this very materialistic leaning, that they know that the Lord is supreme, they know that the purpose of life is higher than sense gratification, yet they find themselves just too attached to say no, in a sense. And so they have this relationship with the Lord that whenever they're doing well, they're just kind of happy and rejoicing in that, and maybe performing some yagyas as a formality to the Lord, but not so much absorbed in thoughts of the Lord. And then as soon as there's some disturbance and they're feeling inconvenienced or disturbed, then they immediately go to the Lord and offer such nice, flowery, pious words. And
Sorry, Shantatma.
but that's okay.
Somebody can stop the recording after, please.
And this is actually, they have a very materialistic relationship. It's kind of like a transactional relationship with the Lord. And so this is kind of business as usual in the material world. Even among those who are religious or so-called spiritual and pious, religious persons often have the same mentality as the demigods do, that when they're disturbed, they go to the Lord, and when everything is nice, then they may go to a church or temple on a Sunday as a token kind of gesture, but they're not very much thinking of the Lord. And so it's a very transactional nature. And so this is what the demigods are accustomed to. So this is kind of that defining relationship with Paramatma. As long as we're on that level of transactional piety, then it's really the Lord in his form as Paramatma that we're dealing with there. And when a person goes beyond that consciousness, that self-centered false ego consciousness, and thinks that I just want to serve the Lord for his own pleasure, and I wouldn't even think of asking something material from the Lord, then now we actually have a personal relationship with Krishna instead of a business relationship. And that's the focus of Bhagavan, of the personality of Godhead. That's when we're engaging with the Lord in his Bhagavan feature. So this is largely the difference there. And I really find this section that I was reading and that I shared with you from the Bhagavatam really edifying, because we may not be demigods. We may be here in ISKCON, as part of Srila Prabhupada's movement. And Srila Prabhupada has very adroitly and unabashedly taught the principles of pure devotional service. Everything for Krishna, nothing for me. Anya vilasita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavartam. Serving the Lord without any ulterior motive, in a way that's not covered by desires for fruitive results or knowledge, and which is simply thinking of how the Lord will be pleased. We're here in this, very fortunately in this organization, but we may, at least speaking for myself, we may find ourselves kind of dropping into this sort of lackadaisical kind of consciousness of sort of pursuing my dream life in Krishna consciousness. Actually, everybody in the material world is sort of pursuing whatever their particular idea of their dream life is. And when we come to Krishna consciousness, we learn so much, and we have the opportunity to transform our consciousness so much, but we can also sometimes be up a little bit more and sometimes be down a little bit more, and we might sort of fall back into this like my dream life, like how can I get the ideal house and, you know, have a nice partner and kind of make sure that my financial situation is really ideal and make sure I get all the free time I want whenever I want it and be able to you know, go on vacation at least 3 times a year or whatever our particular idea of that may be. It's still the my dream life kind of approach, although we sort of theme it with Krishna consciousness. It's like, my dream life in Krishna consciousness. And so, at least speaking for myself, we might find that we kind of get stuck in that rut, you know. We can fall back into that, like, oh my Lord, you know, it's like, I really want to have this, I really want this to go well, and of course I'll perform pure devotional service to you as well, especially if, you know, you hear my prayers very nicely and respond to them in the way that I hope that you will. So for me, I found that to be like very instructive to be able to see the mentality of pure devotees and side by side in the Bhagavatam with mentality of demigods and mixed devotees, because it's there to help us see that contrast and awaken questions in ourselves like, ooh, am I more like those pure devotees or am I more like those demigods? You know, and now I have to look at my mentality and look at my consciousness and study that. So that was, I mean, I think there's a number of other things that could be said about this verse, like other aspects that could be brought out, especially because it's going into so many personal details of the loving interactions between Krishna and his devotees, which are very beautiful and very moving. But I'll go ahead and just end there with that thought. So we have a few minutes. Would anybody like to make a comment, or does anybody have any kind of reflection? And a reflection can really just be anything that we hear in class that stood out to us in any way, or that we found impressive, or just made some impression on us. And if anybody has any questions, I'm not so qualified, but I'll try to answer those also. Yes, Mother Ananga.
Thank you for your class. So who was Ritrasura?
I'm sorry?
Who was Ritrasura? He was a devotee.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
in his past life, he was,
Mm.
you know?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Yes. Yeah, so Vritrasura, he is a devotee. In his previous life, he was known as Maharaj Chitraketu. And at the part that I'm in the Bhagavatam, we haven't heard about his past life yet, because Maharaj Parikshit first of all hears about Vritrasura as a demon. And you know, at the end of the pastime, when Indra is just close to killing Vritrasura, he finds it's actually a very, very difficult task, and he's finding that he's not succeeding, and he's becoming weak, and he's like exasperated, and he's kind of on the point of giving up. And then this big demon, and he's very fierce looking. I mean, you can't mistake him for anybody other than a demon in that sense. He's got this big red beard and his big teeth, and he's always doing wild stuff, like just jumping up and down and licking. It says he's like licking the stars, you know. It'd be kind of disturbing in the universe if somebody comes and starts licking all the planets and everything. But it just says that he's a devotee, but he's in the body of a demon, and so there comes a certain nature with that, you know. So he's there like jumping up and down, making all this noise, roaring like that. But he's at heart, he's actually a devotee, and so when Indra loses the will to continue fighting, thinking that it's hopeless, he can't defeat this demon, Vritrasura, as a devotee of the Lord, he recognizes, actually, it's the Lord's desire that Indra kill me. And he begins preaching to Indra, to encourage him and enthuse him, and to have faith in the weapon that Narayan gave him. That like, don't worry, like, you can do it, you know, you're empowered by Lord Narayan, he wants this to happen, you can definitely do it. And so then the demigods are like, who is this personality? And Maharaj Parikshit is hearing this story, and he's like, at the end of the pastime, he's like, okay, let's go back for a moment here. Who is that demon? Because he sounds more like a devotee. And so then Parikshit Maharaj describes, Shukadeva Goswami describes that in his past life he was Maharaj Parikshit, and I won't go into the whole story, but he is a king who attained complete perfection in pure devotional service. And but he was cursed by Lord Shiva's partner, Parvati, over a little misunderstanding that took place between them. It's nothing big, sometimes misunderstandings happen. But when he was cursed, he was, Tatastu, I accept it, that's okay. And so that's how he appeared, as this, apparently a demon externally, and even according to his behavior and nature, a demon. But actually it's just, I was paying attention as it was describing what Vritrasura was doing that was so disturbing the universe. There was actually nothing sinful. He wasn't like harming anybody. He was just kind of being a big old demon, you know, just jumping up and down and making lots of noise. And Indra was very inimical towards him, recognizing as a demon, wanted to kill him. So, yeah. Any other thoughts or reflections or questions? Yes, Prabhu.
In the beginning of the lecture, you mentioned that the demons don't follow Shastak injunction. Could you elaborate on that? Because often, like Hiranyakashipu, we see he is following nicely.
Yeah. Yes. So the demons actually do follow Shastra to some extent, but they follow it for their own purpose. They don't actually follow it for the purpose that's given in Shastra. So we can see that in the Bhagavad Gita, in this chapter where Krishna is describing what is a demon, he does something really interesting. I really think it's fascinating. He describes them in the first person. He like quotes a demon. There's like 3 or 4 verses where he's speaking the way a demon would be speaking, and he's thinking, he's saying like, I'm so perfect, and I'm so happy, and I'm so powerful, and anybody who's presented themselves to me as an enemy or obstacle to my pursuits in the past, I've killed them all. Anybody who does so in the future, I will also kill. I will enjoy, I will control in this material world, and I will enjoy in so many ways. I will offer charity, I will perform yajnas, and in this way I will rejoice. So I remember reading the first few times Bhagavad Gita, hearing this, as like, wait a minute, this was like the personification of demonic mentality. It's like, I'm going to give in charity, I'm going to perform sacrifices, yajnas. And it seemed like a contradiction. But actually what it tells us is that, like charity, actually it's not inherently good. It's not inherently spiritual or anything to give charity. And indeed we hear how charity in the mode of ignorance is like giving to somebody you shouldn't have given it to. He's just going to do something terrible with the money that you gave him. But giving charity in the mode of goodness is giving to the right person, like a brahmana who's going to use it for beneficial purposes and everything. And yajnas also. Yajnas, although in one sense there is an inherently spiritual component to yajnas, because ultimately all yajnas do acknowledge or go to the Supreme Lord, who's Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam. And yajna is one of the names of the Lord. So all the yajnas described in the Vedas, even the very materialistic ones, hoping for a good kingdom or whatever, they all acknowledge the demigods, and there's acknowledgement of, the Supreme Lord, and to some extent or another. And the demigods, they offer everything to Lord Vishnu because they know that everything is coming from Vishnu. So in one sense, there's always an inherently spiritual element to it, but the focus can be super non-spiritual. It can be about, it's like somebody just wants offspring, somebody wants, they want their child to get really good grades in school, they want a really nice house, they want a lot of prosperity, they want a lot of beautiful wives. And Hiranyakashipu, he was performing so many austerities, just basically for the purpose of maximizing his ability to control and enjoy, which that is the demoniac mentality. So, although he's sort of demons, you could say they sort of cherry pick Shastra and they follow the things that they pick. But as far as actually following Shastra for the purpose that Shastra gives us, which is to, in the more direct sense, become Krishna conscious, or in the more indirect sense, at least you enjoy the things of this world in an honest, shastric way, in a way that you're also worshipping Lord Vishnu, offering the result to Lord Vishnu, to gradually purify your heart. These are both authorized paths, described in the Vedas. But demons, they follow their own path. So even though they use the Shastras, they don't actually follow the path of Shastra, because the path of Shastra will always lead towards Krishna, quickly or slowly, but it will always lead towards Krishna. Whereas in the 16th chapter, where Krishna is describing the difference between demons and demigods, he describes how those who have demonic activity, they just go down more and more and more. So their path doesn't lead towards Vaikuntha, it doesn't lead towards spiritual perfection, it doesn't even lead towards happiness. It just leads towards going down into more and more darker species. Krishna says, I perpetually cast them down into lower and lower species. And so then it takes them a long time in those lower species to purify them, to kind of purify that karma, come back to human birth, and then again they have a chance to choose whether I'm going to take a divine path or a demoniac path. But yeah, they follow their own path, in short, even though they do sometimes follow aspects of Shastra. Thank you, that's a really nice question. Yes, Prabhu?
One thought came to my mind, maybe a little crazy one, when you were speaking about Paramatma, difference between Paramatma and Bhagavan. So we know that Paramatma is present within our heart, all our time here in this material world. And in spiritual world, there is like Vaikuntha planets, there is one Bhagavan and many living entities. So in one way, we are more fortunate than them, because Paramatma is always with us. And in Vaikuntha, there is one Bhagavan and all kinds of living entities. And I don't know how it works, but they are just missing the Lord, don't have his personal presence all the time
within their heart.
I suppose, so how the presence of the Lord is like available to them.
Why should they be less fortunate than persons in the material world who have turned away from Krishna? In this regard, we can think of how Krishna says, Krishna describes his relationship with his devotees. He says, I am always in the heart of my devotees and they are always in my heart. And of course we have the example of Hanuman, who always has Sita and Ram in his heart. So actually, those in the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan or in Vaikuntha, they do also all have the Lord within their heart, but in a much more special, personal way. In the introduction, I can't remember if it's the introduction to Chaitanya Charitamrita or one of the purports, but actually Prabhupada is describing there that if one accepts the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and serves him and serves his mission, serves his associates, then Mahaprabhu will always be in that person's heart. But also Lord Nityananda will be in his heart, and Lord Advaita, and Gadadhar, and Srivas, and actually all of the Lord's associates, eternal associates, will be within that person's heart. So there we can see that it's like in the material world, you get the Lord in your heart by default, even though you don't really want Him there. But in the spiritual world, there's no need for that. There's no need for that super soul feature, because the devotees have already invited the Lord into their hearts. So I think that's how we can reconcile that apparent contradiction. And actually there's one pastime that a devotee, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada recounted in Prabhupada Memories. Or maybe it was in a class or something that I heard. But this devotee had read that portion of the CC that I just mentioned, and he asked Prabhupada about that. He said, Prabhupada, does this mean that the spiritual master is also in our heart? And Prabhupada replied, yes, but you have to let me in. So having the Lord in our heart in a spiritual way is both a voluntary and it's like a reciprocal thing. You know, it's like Prabhupada's ready to be in his disciples' hearts, but he's saying they have to let him in by opening that place, cleaning it up, engaging in his mission, you know, so that Prabhupada knows that he's welcome in that person's heart. So okay, we'll go ahead and end the class here. Thank you for awesome reflections and comments. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Yeah.